Hello and welcome to Tabletop 24. I'm Alan, and this is another episode of We'll Play Again, where we take a look at games that have recently gotten to the table with a view of how quickly we can get them back to the table. With ever-growing collections, time can be precious, so we answer the question of, will we play again? Today we have the Cantaloop, Book 2, A Hack of a Plan, from Lookout Games, which is part of their paper point and click line. If you haven't done so already, I suggest you check out our review of the Book 1, which is where this story starts, and this is a continuation. And on that note, we're going to try and avoid spoilers, but everything from this point out will contain mild spoilers, so we will try and touch on some of the story that you're going to see, but bear that in mind before you continue any further, because there will be some of those spoilers in there. So if you want to come in it completely fresh, I understand that. Skip towards the end of the video when I get to the closing comments. So, very much the same as the first one, and then we're going to run over a lot of similar bits and pieces. As before, you've got your map of the town. Differently, you've got some punch board. You've got your trusty red laminate that's going to help you decode some of the information, your inventory, and your deck of cards. We've not got all of them, but we've got most of them here. We'll be using those to navigate the island, going to these different pages, which will then give us locations to visit and also interact with some of the environment. And it will also enable us to have conversations with some of the main characters and some of the sort of bystanders as we go. This is the paper version, as it pretty much says, of that point and click genre that we were so fond of. And games like Escape from Monkey Island, the Discworld point and click games, all of those type of things, it's all that nostalgia that comes with those. There are a lot of things that go on in this game that are very similar to the first one, and so therefore a lot of it is just more. It's just more of the original, and that isn't necessarily a bad thing. They do try and do a few other things, and we'll get to that shortly. But as was with the first one, you'll start off your game with your trusty magnifying glass, and you'll be able to interact with that to have a look at your cell phone or have a look at people or items and see whether you can engage with them, so that as you go through, you'll be collecting even more of these items, which might change the location, so change what we're looking at. It might enable us to get other items, so we've got a dog and we've got a clean dog. Like I say, some spoilers will come throughout. One thing I really like about this one compared to the first one is the inventory is a fraction of the size of the first one. So they've obviously learned from that. I didn't really engage with the inventory too much on the first one, so this is something that's nice to see. It's only really relevant for things that you're gonna have to look at, whereas the other one had a lot more description about what you was looking at. As always, your interactions with stuff at the locations is on the left, and there is a very, very good hint system at the back of the book, which will go through, tell you, well, how far have you got, what items have you got. It knows, it's clever enough to know whereabouts you are in the storyline. So recommend using that if you do get stuck. It's written really well and can kind of sometimes get you over that hump of that one puzzle that you can't quite get, or what do I need to sort of take that next step. So that is very good from the design of the game and how it interacts. And whereas before you might have had on the console type games or the PC type games where you can probably have a hint or something like that, and it gives you that hint is in there. But once you've gotten over those hints, you'll be going to other locations, you'll be visiting things that you behind locked doors that you couldn't quite get to, engaging in conversation with others. And I think we've got it here. This is our key reference, so as you go through, you'll get told to mark off certain boxes, and then you can only interact with things that you've marked off as you go through. And that is a big focus of how that hint system works. And it's really clever. It knows what you've done by using this index of what you've interacted with already. So very much more of that same, and that isn't a bad thing, like I say. It's easy to grasp system. You're pretty much having a look at a lot of things around, seeing what the text is going to display with your red laminate, and just using those clues to go through it. It will know if you're trying to force it by just going, well, what does this do? What does that do? But at the same time, a lot of the stuff on the location you're going to have to look to. But if I start going, I'm going to put my cell phone with that dog that we found. Dog's not going to use the cell phone. It knows that, and it will sort of take the mick out of you and make a joke at your expense if you're trying to do that. So There is some challenges in this. Like I say, using that hint system, it can sometimes be very helpful. What I will say is I hit this in one run. I did this in about 5 hours, whereas the previous one, I stopped and started it a few times. And I do think that playing this through in one hit is the better way of doing it, because it gives you a lot more in the story to sort of one thing after the other, after the other, after the other. And you're using what you've known about some of the other locations, some of the other items to link them together. Whereas doing that stop start, you kind of got to catch yourself up. In the previous version, I did that by going through the hint system to sort of go, right, okay, well, this was where I was going with this. And that helped, but hitting it in one run, it's not always practical, but it was definitely the better way to experience this. And it rewards you for that, because this is essentially set in one day. And so actually that time you've spent doing these things is the time that the story has elapsed over. So this is quite good, and it's quite nice, and you can sort of relate to when things are happening and when trigger points are coming through. And with that, the story is written really, really well. There will hopefully be another one of these, and it will continue the story. I think it may well be released this year. I think it was supposed to be released last year, but it's going to continue from where you leave this one off. But this one does something slightly different. Now, I'm just going to try and find... There we are. So in the first book, it was very much getting your items, looking at your items, what can you combine to advance the story. At this point, you're going to have certain triggers where you will be presented with a hacking mechanic, and you'll be using some of these items and some cards that are going to enable you to work on this puzzle. And you've got a certain number of cards that will do certain abilities and will essentially move your virus around their viruses and try and get you to break their codes. Now, it's different. It's not always good. The solutions to it can sometimes either be too obvious or too difficult. And I think it's probably the weakest point of this edition. But they've obviously tried to do something a little bit new and a little bit different, because they can't just keep putting out the same stuff, or people are not going to do it. Now, I did think, given the fact that you've got Fly on the front cover, who's one of the secondary characters, we were going to see things from his perspective, which is why we've got this. But no, you're doing it as Hook, so he's dumbed it down, which helps the mechanics of it. But I think this was possibly over-engineered and not necessary. Now, I still like what they're trying to do, and I like the fact that they're trying to be a little bit brave with adding additional mechanics, but I think it just didn't quite gel with what you were trying to do, and it didn't always progress the story in the right way for me. It was kind of like, we're going to put this puzzle in, and you've got a number of these puzzles to go through, and if you don't hit them in the right order or do them in the right way, well, then it's just a fail. There's no consequence for failing. You just have to keep trying. And there was a couple where I can't see it. I spent too long looking at this. Let's just see what the hint said. Okay, fine. We've solved that one. We're going to move on. Now, it's not necessary to actually physically solve all of these to move through. They're just a nice different puzzle, but I think they were probably a little bit unnecessary for what the game's trying to do. Now, maybe on a console PC video game version, that would have been better integrated. But on the paper, where you're moving items along and you're playing the cards to move the items, I think maybe it's just a bit lost on that. But that still doesn't take away from the rest of the game. I think that this is a really good genre, and I think they're trying to do something very, very different with this type of game, moving away from the exit style escape room type games and picking up on the nostalgia of something that I grew up with and I know many people else will have. So I'm excited to see where this is going to go. Hopefully they'll do something else. They'll still try and be inventive with what they're doing, but I think there was a little bit of a miss with the new puzzle type on here. They're clearly writing a good story and they clearly know how to work on this type of genre, so I'm really looking forward to book 3. So as you'll probably guess, I would play these again. However, it's a little bit of a different one on this. The fact that I'm not going to play this one again, I will be looking forward to book 3. Now, I'll put this down as we'll play again soon. That is only based on the fact that if I had the next one, I'd be looking to get it out fairly quick. but I don't have it. It's not been launched in the UK yet. I think it may have landed in Europe, but we should hopefully see that at some point in this year. So thank you for watching along with this episode of We'll Play Again. If you haven't done so already, please check out other videos on the channel, give us a like and a subscribe, and we'll catch you next time. Take care.